conscious, and we can, become equipped to deal with some of these issues and to help people grow and find that freedom. One example, I know she won't mind me sharing this because she's very determined to get her story out there. One of my clients had traumatic childhood. I tend to work with childhood trauma in my work. But one of my clients who's recently finished with me suffered with depression all of her life, and now she'll tell you she lives a different life. I journeyed with her, we explored some of the major issues. She came to me, and one of the first thing that she said to me when she walked through the door, a person of faith, a lovely Christian woman, but she said, don't talk to me about God the Father. Jesus is all right, but I can't do God the Father. And that was absolutely rooted in her story. But over time, as we journeyed together, if I'd have introduced certain things to her, I don't know if you've come across the Father's Love Letter, for example. If I'd introduced that to her on week 1, she'd have been out the door and never come back. But as I journeyed with her, with fear and trepidation, I have to say, eventually, I did introduce that to her, and it was life-changing because it was at the right moment, in the right time, after we'd done much digging and much journeying together. But I love my job, I have to say, because I see miracles on a very regular basis. They don't come with blue flashing lights. They don't come with a load of hullabaloo that you sometimes see miracles surrounded by. I call them backdoor miracles because they sneak in. But when you see somebody being set free from depression or lifelong anxiety, that to me is a miracle. When you can facilitate somebody walking a different life, that is awesome. It is, like I say, I've got the best job in the world. I hear some stuff having said that. I tend to work with very broken people. But that is where God has called me to, and I love it. I absolutely love it. My pastor laughs at me because I talk about getting me wellies on and getting in the mire, and I like getting in the mire. And he laughs at me. He says, I don't know anybody who likes going in the mire like you do, but it's like, oh no, bring it on. Because in there, as we explore it and we understand it, there is freedom, there is wholeness, there is life. But that comes at, we can't just do that with no training. And so we'll talk to you later some more about the training that we now offer in Bradford. But I promised you 3 things on the bulletin, didn't I? I said that I'd give you some practical skills. What else did I say? I'd give you some practical skills. I would show us where perhaps some of our deepest needs come from. And so that's what we're going to start with this morning. So, some of this, as I go through this, I'm going to draw you a nice picture now. Forgive my art. It's not very good. But as we go through this, you'll think, well, why is she saying this? Because we're all mature Christian ladies here, I'm assuming. And so, because we've walked with the Lord for a time, this might feel like I'm teaching grandma to suck eggs. But don't dismiss it all just quite yet, because, there'll be some, I'm praying that there'll be some gold here for us all this morning. Okay, so, before the fall then, God was available to us. He was available to Adam and Eve, and they lived under, I hope you can all see this, they lived under that spring of living water. They were in full fellowship with God, and they knew the wonderful relationship, that perfect relationship with God. And it was beautiful, and it was precious. And it was the spring of living water. And it was fully available to Adam and Eve because there was nothing in the way. Okay? So I'm hoping that that's not too much like rocket science this morning. So there we've got Adam and Eve. Now, God, in his amazing wisdom, made us with 3 deep needs. He made us with the need for security, significance, so that's a purpose, and self-worth. Now, before the fall, it was a wonderful thing, because God gave us those deep needs and desires in our heart to be fully met in Him. And as long as we come to the living water to get those three needs met, we can live in a place of safety. We can live in a place of knowing that we have a purpose, that God gives us significance. And we can live in a place knowing that we have value. God gave us value. He gave us that worth, that sense of worth. So before the fall, that was a wonderful thing. And He gave us those desires, He gave us those needs, so that we would keep coming back to the fountain of living water to get those needs met. So those needs were within us before the fall to drive us into a deeper relationship with God. How awesome is that? What an amazing gift. What an amazing gift that God gave us, those three deep needs to drive us into deeper, more perfect relationship with Him. Wow, what a blessing. What a blessing that is, that God gave us those needs so that we could be driven deeper into relationship with Him. So all was fine. All was fine. Until, of course, the snake comes along. And he plants that seed of doubt. Now, Cheryl this morning was talking about, let's not judge. Let's not judge. Adam and Eve here, let's not judge Eve. No, she was surrounded by God's goodness. She only knew God's goodness. And yet, she was able to be deceived. Did God really say? You know, is God totally good? And even though she was surrounded by only God's goodness, she was able, that seed of doubt was planted in her. Equally, you know, I stand here, I'm not judging Eve. I know that if I'd been in that place, it'd been me that'd been doubting God's goodness, ultimately. So don't be surprised and don't judge ourselves, ladies, when we struggle with God's goodness. Because clearly we live with a lot of brokenness as well. You know, so it's a much bigger challenge, actually, for us to believe in the total goodness of God. And so let's not judge ourselves either in that. But then, suddenly, because Eve doubted and then ultimately chose something other than God. So this is a solid foundation because it drives us deeper into relationship with God. However, once the fall comes, we begin to look for ways to meet these needs outside of God. Now, that becomes a little bit more tricky because suddenly, what was that firm, solid, firm foundation, it's now a little bit more shaky. And suddenly, our security, our significance, and our self-worth are not that solid foundation anymore, because we are seeking to find them elsewhere. We're seeking to fulfill these needs elsewhere, other than that fountain of living water. So when Adam and Eve came out of the garden, they felt unloved. So no longer do they feel secure. They felt worthless because they'd let God down. They felt directionless. They had new feelings that they'd never experienced before. They experienced shame. They wanted to hide and cover up. They'd never experienced shame before. They'd never needed to feel shame before. But now they needed to hide and cover up. And so, because here they are totally dependent on God, and they got all of their needs met in God, and now God seems to be less available because of sin. And so they look to other things, but actually it's the thing that's driving this is their desire to be independent of God rather than dependent on God. You see, this model before the fall relies on us being completely dependent on God. It relies on us being completely and totally in beautiful and precious relationship with God and getting all our needs met in God. But once the fall comes, we're seeking that independence. We're seeking to meet these needs then outside of this fountain of living water. And God says something about this in Jeremiah 2, verse 13. Just find Jeremiah 2. So Jeremiah 2, verse 13. I should have got that bookmark in it, shouldn't I? Jeremiah 2, verse 13 says, this is God speaking, he says, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they have hewn themselves broken cisterns that can hold no water." That breaks God's heart. You know, it's like he's saying, look, I've got this fountain of living water. You can get all of your needs met here. And yet you're choosing independent. Oh, sorry. You have no idea how to stop that happening. You're choosing to build yourself up. So I'm going to be on my knees by the time I finish that. You've chosen to build yourselves buckets with holes in. And instead of living water and a fountain, you've ended up with a dirty, muddy puddle. Why would you choose that? Why would you choose? And that breaks God's heart, because suddenly this is not. It's not the fountain of living water anymore. It's a muddy puddle at best. And it's really not the same, is it? A muddy puddle is not the same as living water. I'm sure I have no idea what to do with this. Well, there we go. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Well, anyway, we'll just... Sorry, ladies.
Can you wedge a chair under it to hold it up, just sailing thing?
Yeah,
Ah, excellent. Thank you, ladies, for rescuing me there. So we build our broken systems, and it's really interesting. You know, we often think, oh, babies are not born in sin, and you know that scripture of how, you know, it's like we're born in sin, but it's because from the moment we're born, actually, we are looking to get these needs met. We are absolutely looking to get these needs met. But our experience, of course, is that we don't know about God from that moment we're born. So right from that very early moment, we are digging our broken systems. So we all have our broken systems. We all have those places that we go to for comfort, for security. We all look to other things, or we did as children. Right from the word go, we're looking to those other things, we're looking to broken systems. So my challenge to you this morning is, I really encourage you to ask the Lord to show you what your broken systems are. Really ask the Holy Spirit to show you, to begin to show you where those broken systems are. What am I depending on other than God? Where do I go to for my needs to be met other than God? That's a big question. And it's something that my students come back to time and time again. So, you know, week one, we talk about this stuff. And you know, I've now got some year 3 students who still keep coming back to this. And more broken systems are constantly being found. And it's like, oh, and that's a broken system. You know, but the clues can be, and again, some of this comes from an unconscious place because it's deep down stuff. You know, so don't be surprised if your broken systems don't come to the surface straight away. Some of them you might be able to spot straight away. So things like, oh, I go to the chocolate when I'm feeling a bit fed up, or oh, I go on a spending spree, or whatever it is. So some of them you might know straight away. But some of them might be a little bit more hidden and a little bit more secret than that. You know, but the clues are as to which of these have been compromised, if you like. The clues are in those places when you find yourself overreacting, for example. We all have times when we overreact. You know, was it about that circumstances that made me really cross? You know, you look at the size of the situation and you think, that situation did not demand that level of crossness. And yet somehow we are that cross. And we wonder where it's coming, and it's coming from somewhere deep, deep within. Those are the clues, ladies, as to which, you know, what was it? Was it my security? Was it my significance? Was it my self-worth that was being challenged in that moment? Those are questions that, again, kind of come to light over time. They're not necessarily ones that you'll know the answer to straight away, and yet they are questions that ultimately are life-giving. Because the more places we can spot our broken systems, the more of this we can spot in our lives, gives us the opportunity to come back to the living water and to exchange. Again, what an awesome thing God does for us. He gives us the opportunity. He knows we'll dig broken systems. He breaks his heart. He provides the way back. Is it because he didn't leave us in our place of sin? He didn't leave us without hope, just with our broken systems. He provided the way back through Jesus. He did it all. How awesome, how loved, how blessed we are that knowing we could not find our way back from our broken systems, And he knew that we'd continue to dig our broken cisterns. But he said, "Oh, no, and it's okay. I'll provide the way back through Jesus to give us access once again to that living water." So this morning, it's not about condemnation. It's not about, "Oh, crikey, I've got all these broken cisterns. The list is quite long." It's not about that. It's about realising, "Lord, thank you that today you have shown me my broken cisterns and you've given me the opportunity to come back and to exchange my holy bucket and my muddy puddle, that divine and glorious exchange, for the living water." Oh, what a blessing. We are a blessed people, aren't we? We really are a blessed people that God has chosen to do that for us. So, that's not the best diagram in the world, and for that I do ask for your forgiveness, but it's hopefully you've understood from that, we do have these deep needs within us, this significant security and self-worth. And that problems basically arise when we look to other stuff, and that other stuff lets us down every time. But the more we look to that other stuff, so for example, as I've already said, I tend to work with people who've had trauma in their childhood. Their self-worth is shot. Of course it is. Because they've been let down by significant others that should have been their help and support. The only learning from that is that I'm not important and I don't matter. So for a lot of my clients, they come with issues with all three of those. And that's why, some of this stuff is really deep. And it takes a long time to journey with somebody and get them to a place where actually they can even begin to think about exchanging their broken cisterns for going back to the living water. And yet, as I've already said, the client that, when she came, I'm not talking about God the Father, I'm not talking about God the Father. And yet, through time, patience, and a lot of hard work, digging in the mire with my wellies on, we got there, and now she is living a different life, and I rejoice in that. Being equipped, my heart's desire, as I've said already, is that we absolutely, as a church are equipped to journey with people and to find that freedom. I've completely gone off script. Okay, so John 4, verses 5 to 14. So I'm just going to kind of go back a little bit to underline. Okay, so John 4, verses 5 to 14 says, "So he," that's Jesus, "came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave his son to Joseph. Now, Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink,' for his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, 'How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?' For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and whom it is who says this to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from him himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water, springing up into everlasting life. So what we see here is again this further evidence, if you like, of this need for the living water. That actually these needs, this deep thirst that I believe Jesus was talking about in this passage of significant security and self-worth. He says, if you come to the living water and get those needs met in the living water, then you won't thirst again, because actually there's a good deal of peace. There's a good deal of peace that comes from having more of the living water and less broken systems in your life. So, what I've just shared with you there is kind of some of the basis, if you like, that Waverley training is based on. So hopefully you can see from that it is fully Christian. It's absolutely underpinned by the gospel, which is one reason I believe that it equips us to work well, absolutely, with people of faith, and it enables us to work with people. In fact, I would argue most of the clients I have are people of faith, and when I'm working with people who don't have a faith, it feels like I'm kind of working with one hand tied behind my back, to be honest, because it's much more difficult. How do you tell somebody of no faith? Oh well, you just need to come to the living water, because it's just not quite that straightforward. So it's a great joy to me to be able to work with people of faith, to bring about this freedom, to journey with them, to find their broken systems, and to bring them more into this place of freedom. But so I promised you this morning that we'd understand some of our deepest needs, and I hope that diagram sort of goes some way to explain that ultimately over the years I've tried fairly hard. So I've been qualified now for 10 years. Or 11. Over the years I've tried quite hard, I have to say, to find something other than security, significance and self-worth at the bottom of the pile. It is at the bottom. It is, right down, because it is about the core of our being. It is absolutely about the core of our being, is this stuff. It's not surface stuff. This is deep stuff. And I have to say, having tried fairly hard over the last 11 years to get to something other, I've not managed it yet. That actually these things are the things that God has given us. Like I said in the beginning, God gave us these desires to drive us into deeper relationship with Him. But because of the fall, those things get broken. We are not in that place of getting all of those needs met in Him anymore. So where am I in my notes? Forgive me for a minute. So we've, so I said this morning about this abundant life. The more we can get our needs met in that living water, the more abundant our life will absolutely be. The fewer broken systems we've got, the more living water we've got in our lives. Absolutely, that abundance, that fountain of living water that will spring up from us, as it says in John that we've just read, will be more of a thing in our lives. And we won't feel like we're under the cosh of digging around in our broken systems and not getting anywhere. We will know that abundant life. The more of our lives we can bring under that spring of living water, the deeper the places that we can get to. I work with clients who are utterly convinced that they are rubbish. You know, that is an I am statement. That comes from the core of their being, because of their experiences, because of the things that have happened to them. It's gut. It's like it's deep within them. It is an I am statement. It is I am rubbish, and I don't say that lightly. But you know, they are fully convinced that they are rubbish. But again, as we journey and as we come alongside, and they begin to find their worth in Christ. Oh, it's one of those miracles. It is beautiful. It is precious. And what I also love is that sometimes the most broken, through that healing journey, can actually find the most living water. I think that's redemption. I think that is awesome. Again, and such a blessing. And though, again, you know, all things work together for good, and it's one of those scriptures that we all trot out, isn't it? But, you know, having worked and indeed in my own story, had those places of absolute brokenness redeemed, and being able to find those places of living water, it is a blessing. It is a blessing to be able to find that freedom. And it, you know, I fully believe that when Jesus said on the cross, "It's finished," he meant it. And that redemption is possible for even the most broken of lives. I've seen it. I see it on a regular basis. But I also think it takes skill, it takes training, and it takes time, and it's not something we can do in 5 minutes. It's where I've come to, you know. So, so now I'm sort of hoping that you begin to say, well, that's all very well, but you know, what do? I want to help, I want to draw alongside people, but I don't feel equipped. And so, in my introduction to this session, I said that we'd look at some basic practical skills as well. So, you know, we've gone on a little journey today, we've found out perhaps about our deepest needs, but I want to start off now with some practical, or continue, shall I say, with some practical stuff. So Sue, would you mind just giving me a hand giving these out? Yeah. So, when you get these sheets, I want you to start looking at them. So we're going to look at listening to begin with. When am I not listening? When am I listening?
What did you say?
You need more? You got enough on there? Too high. There we go. Okay. So again, this is some of the stuff that I do with my students. So as we just read through this list, you are not listening to me when you do not care about me. You are not listening to me when you say you understand before you know me well enough. Oh, we all do that, don't we? Oh, I know just how you feel. You are not listening to me when you have an answer to my problem before I finish telling you what my problem is. Think about it. Have we ever been in that pastoral caring situation and we're dying to say something, aren't we? You are not listening to me when you finish my sentence for me. Oh, some of this is a bit close to the bone, isn't it? Oh, now this is an interesting one. You are not listening to me when you find me boring and don't tell me. Now, I would say that with this one, I think there's, you know, if you've got somebody telling you a load of technical information and it's kind of, you know, you get that glazed look and you've no idea what they're saying, you know, I would argue that in those moments it would be appropriate to say, do you know what, I'm really struggling to understand what you're saying to me right now. And in that moment we are finding them boring, you know, because we've just switched off, haven't we, and we're not really tuned in anymore. So, in those kind of circumstances, I think I definitely would say, okay, let's just take a breath. I have no idea what you just said to me. And so, and encouraging them to then perhaps reframe it in a way that I can understand it. Equally, I think there's also a question, when we find somebody's story boring, it's always worth asking ourselves the question, what's going on in me that means I'm not listening to you? Because quite often, it can be that actually there's something, it can sometimes feel like, okay, so you're telling me this story, I've got this much bigger story, and I'm not listening to you because my story needs hearing, and I need to hear, and I want you to hear my story, so I'm not going to listen to you because my story is much bigger than yours. And so, as helpers, in whatever role we find ourselves, as we join alongside, we need to be really careful about our own stuff and be bringing that before the Lord and asking Him to do the work in us so that we are available to listen to people that we're caring for. Because if we are so kind of hung up on our own stuff because we've not dealt with our own stuff, we're not going to be available to listen to somebody other. Perhaps the best example of this, of kind of not being heard, of somebody else's story being bigger than mine. A number of years ago now, we were involved in a fatal car accident. Me and my family were fine, but the motorcyclist that came down the road too fast and into us came off his motorbike and flew over the top of our car and sadly died. And it was horrific. There is just no other word for it, really. It was horrific. It was really difficult. Good counselling skills and the Lord's grace meant that we were able to deal with it, and none of us were traumatised by it. But we needed to talk about that story because it was significant. And I saw a couple of days later, a group of people, and it's like, we've been involved in a really difficult car accident, and obviously we had whiplash and that kind of thing, but ultimately we were all okay. So you're relaying the story, and before long, it's like, oh well, it's just like when we had a bump on the road, and before long, it was like somebody's headlight that had just been knocked out, and there was no kind of drama, and you just think, classic case of actually you're not listening. You're not listening to the depth of my story. You're so desperate to tell me your story that you're not listening to me and my difficulty. Now, as I say, good counselling skills, we're all good at that. So it's just kind of working out, our stuff so that we are not in that place, really, of wanting to tell our stuff so that we stop listening to the other person. Equally, you just done the next one, you're not listening to me when you tell me about your experience, making mine seem unimportant. That's the story I've just told you, is absolutely what happened in that circumstance. You're not listening to me when you're communicating with somebody else in the room. Phones. She'll say no more. Now, this is an interesting one for all those helpers, I think. You are not listening to me when you refuse my thanks by saying you haven't really done anything. We all like to dismiss it, don't we? Oh, it was nothing. Oh, it was fine. Whereas actually, if you've made a difference to somebody, they want you to know. They want you to know that you've made a difference. And you dismissing it and saying, oh, it was nothing. It's like you're undermining what's happened to them. You're undermining the difference that you've made in their lives. So just be aware of your language. The next time you're tempted to say, oh, it was nothing, it was fine, done in a moment. Think that how else might I say or acknowledge that thanks? It could be, I really appreciate you saying that. It makes a massive difference. Because then in that moment you have valued what they've said, rather than just dismissing it as not important. So, that's when you're not listening to me. You are listening to me when you come quietly into my private world and let me be. You are listening to me when you really try to understand me, even if I'm not making much sense. You are listening to me when you grasp my point, even if it's against your own sincere convictions. You are listening to me when you realise that the hour I took from you has left you a bit tired and drained. Again, in our counselling training, we talk about listening with our whole bodies. So listening is far more than just with our ears. And there's a very great difference between listening and hearing. You know, if I'm listening well to a client, I will be using all of certainly my eyes, my ears, I'll be tuned into them, I'll be watching their body language, I'll be watching for hearing changes in perhaps tone of voice. You know, I'll be looking, listening, tuned into little clues. I'll be noticing perhaps that irritating foot tap. What's that all about? Sometimes I'll bring that into the room. Sometimes clients will laugh when they talk about something really difficult. Bringing that incongruence into the room can help bring some deeper understanding to the person. So actually listening is so much more than just hearing what is being said. It's trying to make connections from other things that the client has said. You know, sometimes, I mean, by the Lord's grace, I have a memory like a sieve. But, you know, there are times when I'll remember something a client said 6 months ago. It's like, oh, how did I remember that, Lord? Thank you. You know, but he'll bring something, and it's like, oh, a while ago you said. And that might be something completely different to what they've just said. But quite often, we need to bring in those two conflicting views into view. Because sometimes we can hold conflicting views within ourselves, and never the twain shall meet, because we're actually very good at keeping them separate. Good example of this is years ago when I was going down to Farnham to do my training, my train was cancelled, and I ended up sitting by a gentleman, and she said, oh, do you know, he says, this train is always late. The very next sentence he said was, but when I'm with my friends, this train is never late. Now, he had never made those connections in his head. But it's a good example of how we can separate that information and kind of, you know, live in those different zones. So, what had got him to those two places? So, quite often, you know, sometimes when he was on that train, you know, it would be cancelled or it would be late, as indeed was our experience that day. However, I knew that the train wasn't always late because I'd caught that train lots of times before, and this was the first time that the train had been cancelled. So I knew from my own experience actually that the train wasn't always late, but in his head it was, because that was the information he remembered. He remembered and clocked the times when the train was late. If the train wasn't late and he just got on the train and did his stuff, he didn't log that because it didn't fit with his belief system. So it was discarded as unimportant information. However, when he's with his friends, and he says, but when I'm with my friends, the train's never late, because he said to his friends, oh, that train's always late. And then, of course, he's with his friends and they all get on the train and it's not late. His friends would then make fun of him and say, what do you mean this train's always late? Come on, look, it's on time today. How can you say it's always on late? It's on time today. So in his head, he had these two conflicting pieces of information. The train's always late, or it's never late. Of course, the truth is actually somewhere in the middle. Sometimes the train's late, and I could be with my friends, or I might not be with my friends. So our job as counsellors quite often, or indeed helpers, pastoral carers, can be to remember those bits of conflicting information and bring them into the room, because that can help the client move on in their thinking and become less kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Black and white in their thinking. Because actually there's a lot of shades of grey. Okay, so that's a little foray into, I could digress again. Let's go back to listening. So you are listening to me when you allow me the dignity of making my own decisions, even though they might be wrong. You are listening to me when you do not take my problem from me, but allow me to deal with it on my own, in my own way. You are listening to me when you hold back your desire to give me good advice. You know, so it's not, pastoral care is not often, it's not always about offering good advice. It's about enabling the client or the person you're helping to come to their own conclusions and their own decisions. But you might do that by offering the opposite point of view, if you like, or bringing in a different perspective. You are listening to me when you do not offer me religious solace, when you sense I'm not ready for it. Now clearly, with a client I was talking to that couldn't stand God the Father when she first came into my room, you know, if I'd have offered her the Father's love letter that first session, like I say, she'd never come back because I wasn't listening to her. But again, it was about walking with her, accepting her for where she was, and then being able to move her from that place as she was ultimately loved better from her hurt. You are listening to me when you give me enough room to discover for myself what's going on. And you are listening to me when you accept my gift of gratitude by telling me how good it makes you feel to know that you've been helpful. So just, you know, again, in our training we have whole lectures around listening, rather than just the quick 10 minutes that we've had this morning. But do take those sheets, you know, and if you're in that place of being involved in pastoral care, have a think, have a ponder on those sheets, and just just work with them. Okay, so right. So the next thing I want to give you, I've got more sheets, is to look at questions. So questioning and listening are kind of, I guess, the very basic tools of my trade. And like I say, there's whole lectures on these as well, again, instead of like just 5 minutes. But I think there should be enough there. If not, let me know.
Has everybody got one?
I need 4 more on this table, please. One more? One more. One more on this table as well, please. Right, please. Sorry for you. That's the same this one. Okay, so quick look at questions. Can I have a sheet as well, please? So, sorry. Thank you. Have you got one?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so basically there are 2 types of questions. There are closed questions and open questions. So a closed question is useful when you require a specific answer, such as, is it bin day today? So it's a quick yes, no, or a specific answered question. So they usually have a short reply. So too many closed questions then, when you're in a conversation with somebody, can feel like the Spanish Inquisition. You know, and so use them sparingly. As I say, they're helpful to bring clarity, you know, to a specific question. If there's a specific thing that you need information of, closed questions are useful. But open questions invite a much fuller comprehensive answer. So they're useful in gaining kind of a bigger picture. So for example, instead of asking, is it bin day today? And the answer could be no. You could ask, so when is bin day? Well, the recycling's on a Monday. The ordinary bin comes every other week on the Tuesday. So can you see, by just rephrasing the question, you've got a much fuller answer. And that is the same with, when we're in conversation with people. So we can ask questions, what, when, how, where, tell me, explain that a little bit more to me. Tell me is clearly not a question, but it is a phrase I quite often use. It's just inviting that fuller, more information, so it feels less like a barrage of questions and like a fuller conversation, really, when you're drawing alongside somebody. However, the question to avoid when we're asking questions is why. So why underpins everything we do. Underpins everything I do. I want to know why all the time. Why did you react like that? Why did you kick the cat? Underpins everything I do. I want to know all the time why. Because why, ultimately, when we understand what's going on, which is what we're trying to achieve, when we understand what's going on, we'll be able to bring in that different perspective, or perhaps move from that broken system to that living water. However, if we ask why, you'll quite often get the response, I don't know. Because if we knew, we wouldn't be doing it quite often. So, the example at the bottom of the sheet, it's like, why did he hit Fred? I don't know. But if you ask, what was happening before you hit Fred? You get a very different question, or a very different answer. You actually get the information you want. Well, he was calling me names. You didn't get that information from why you hit Fred. You're much less likely to get that information out of them. But so try and avoid why. Although it underpins everything, and it's absolutely the question we're all dying to answer. It's the question we need to know the answer to. Is why? Why? But it's not actually a very useful question in terms of when we're in relationship with somebody. So hopefully then, this morning, I've whetted your appetite into kind of how to draw alongside somebody. We've understood a little bit about our deepest needs, but I've also whetted your appetite of how we might help people, and indeed take those questions, take the sheets away and mull on them and chew on them, both the listening ones and the questions one. Ask yourself, is that an open question or a closed question? Would it be more helpful to ask an open question there? What could that open question be? Again, as I said, there's whole lectures on that. But today, as I said at the beginning, it is my heart's desire that we become equipped as a church to meet mental health needs of our congregations. And so we are started off talking to you about Waverley Abbey College. It is based down in Farnham in Surrey. I did do my training down there. So I am, as I said, a fully qualified counsellor, professional counsellor. But I do work, not exclusively, but largely, with people within different church fellowships, really, which is my privilege and honour to do that. But I'm also very aware that the need is great. It feels like, to be honest, and I know I'm misquoting this or using it out of context, but the verse where it says that the harvest is great and the workers are few. I know that's about sharing the gospel, but it feels like it's applicable in this situation as well. That actually there's a lot of mental health needs in our churches, and yet there are few that are well equipped, I would argue, to work with, to the depth that we can work with, to seek out, to find that freedom, to facilitate that freedom within people's lives. So I've also been given the opportunity today to talk to you a little bit about what Waverley Abbey College does. So as I've said, it's based down in Farnham, and that is indeed where I went to do my training, so I would make that intrepid train journey once a month for about 6 years whilst I did my degree and then I did my masters. But whilst I was making those journeys down there, it's like, the need is here in the north as well, actually. The need is, I so want this training, you know, because it is quality training. Clearly I'm biased, but you know, it is so Waverley Abbey College is the only college in the country, the only Christian college in the country that offers Christian counselling to diploma of higher education, degree and master's level. So there are other Christian colleges that offer counselling, but it's only to a level 4 qualification. Whereas our basic qualification is a level 5 qualification, and then you can go on to do further study as well. Equally, we also offer, so you know, reeling back from that a little bit, we also offer a 5-day, 1 day a week course twice a year called the Introduction to Christian Care and Counselling. And that's a taster session basically. It's 5 days of pretty much what we've done this morning, only obviously in a lot more detail. So that 5-day course is an excellent course for anybody who's involved in pastoral caring ministry. It just equips you, again, to understand people better and how to minister to them more effectively. We then offer a 1-year course. So the 1-year course is exactly the same as the first year of the Diploma of Higher Education. So you're in the same lecture room with the same students. But at the end of that 1 year, if you want that 1 year to be a standalone, again, that doesn't qualify you to be a professional counsellor, does equip you further and in deeper depth to work in that pastoral caring role. And you know, you will gain a good amount of insight into how people operate. Years 2 and 3 of the diploma are kind of more, what are they? The first year is very much about how people function, how people work, and then the practical skills, you know, a tiny taster of that you've had this morning. But the second year is more about kind of specific disorders you'll come across. So we cover things like eating disorders and depression and anxiety and a whole other array of things, you know, that will again equip you further. And then year 3 again is further equipping it. But throughout that journey, there is a personal growth element to it as well. So a personal development element to it as well. So you'll see from this pop-up, you know, the first word there is transformational. And it's interesting, as I'm working with my year 1s at the moment, they're now about halfway through year 1. We were just saying actually last week how transformational I think each one of them has found the course so far. That they've gone on that personal journey of growth. That it's like, you know, it's, I came and I thought I was going to be equipped for everybody else, but I've had to do, you know, we encourage that personal, as I've said right at the beginning, we encourage that personal growth and that personal development so that actually you become more robust as counsellors, so that you are able to listen more effectively to more clients with more stories because your stuff is being dealt with. It's very much relational. We were again just talking with my year 1s, and they were saying how the fellowship that they have with each other is sweet. You know, it's really special because you're all on this journey together. You're all on this kind of personal growth journey, but also developing your skills as well. And you know, there's times when we give feedback to each other as well, and so we create a really safe place to grow and learn and make mistakes together. And the year ones were just saying how much they valued that this year. And indeed, my year threes are also well schooled in that. Unique, as I've said, Waverley Abbey is the only Christian college in the country that offers the possibility of doing a higher education qualification. And indeed, all the feedback, and we're not just plucking excellent out of the air to make it sound good. If you look on the back page of the leaflet that you were given, if you've not got one of these, please don't go without one. You know, all these words on that back page are words that our students have used. Enjoyable, life-enhancing, interesting, stimulating, varied, informative, far-reaching, experienced, sacred, current, transforming, affirming, trustworthy, insightful, relevant, exceptional, equipping, excellent, exemplary, fulfilling, inspiring, well-prepared, approachable, empowering, helpful, fantastic, credible, transformative, challenging, enlightening. And indeed, the course has just been re-accredited by Middlesex University, and we were commended in 4 areas due to the excellence of the course. So, I've done a lot of talking, sorry about that. If you've got any questions, fire them at me. Can you about anything?
How do you switch off? Because I don't have any training, obviously, in this.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting what you're saying. I have come alongside a lady over COVID, very depressed, and just always seems to be in that place that you can't lift her, you know, and it's got to be, she's done that with a lot of people, and we just have to cut off from that because the negativity comes onto you.
Yeah.
And there's a problem with that with mental health people, I find, because people don't want to get involved.
Yes, absolutely. And
Liz,
yes.
can you just repeat it for the video?
Yes,
The
okay.
basic concept of the question. Thank
Yes. So the question you've just asked me was how do I switch off when I'm working with clients, when I'm working with that sort of depth of story that I work with, or indeed in a pastoral caring situation, how do you switch off? I think for me, I mean, again, everybody's different, and they need to go on their own journey with it. But I think for me, it's largely about knowing who has responsibility for the client. Ultimately, they are responsible for themselves, and the Lord's responsible for them. I am not. Is my bottom line. That actually, I can, having, again, grappled with some of this stuff myself, it's like, Lord, I'll leave them in your hands. I am not responsible for them. And I think, again, if we are taking more responsibility than is ours, we need to be thinking about what that broken system might be. Dare I say it? So it might be, for example, that I get some of my significance from being over-responsible, or I might get some of my self-worth from taking on responsibility that's not actually mine. And so if we find ourselves in a position where we are taking on responsibility that's not mine, it's working out, okay, so what's going on in me that means I'm not able to leave that person in the Lord's hands, who is far more capable than me, of looking after them and holding them between sessions. It's all part of the equipping. For me, I think everybody has different ways of dealing with it. So some people will have perhaps build in an extra half hour at the end of the day before they go home to family and have to do all the family things and switch mode. Some people will just take that half an hour to kind of reset themselves, perhaps go for a drive or a bit of a walk or whatever it is. I remember doing my training with one lady, and she says, on my drive home, she says, I always drive with my car window down. I have to say I'd freeze to death. But I always drive with my car window down, she says, and as I'm driving along, I just let all the client stuff fly out the window as I'm driving along. Equally, I would argue that the Lord has given me a memory like a sieve, for which I do thank Him, because it means that I can put down clients between sessions. But I also think, again, that's come down to the work that I've done on myself as well, and being able to just rest clients in the Lord. And that doesn't mean I don't think about clients between sessions, because I definitely do. But it's at my choice, and it's that it's kind of like, oh, what's going on with that client? And I will think about them when I'm doing the washing up or whatever. But I'm choosing to do that rather than them invading and taking over my thoughts. If a client's invading, then we need to be thinking about, okay, so what is going on in me that means I can't put down that person. And it might be that we're taking too much responsibility. It might be that there's a trigger to my story. It might be, there can be 101 reasons. And so it's always worth going on that journey. Perhaps we feel burdened that their story's not being heard. But it might be because actually underneath all of that, my story's not being heard. So that's why I'm saying to you, it's really important that actually we do the work on ourselves first, and that needs to be an important part of the work and the equipping, I think, that goes on. Has that answered your question?
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Did you have a question as well? Here you go first.
I just have two quick ones kind of together. First one just goes on from Heather's. You see your courses.
Yeah.
Is there a thing in it that teaches you to deal? To let that all go?
Yeah, I mean, again, we would have these conversations in lectures, and we would talk about how we let go of things, and you need to find your own way ultimately. Some people go and have a bath with lots of candles. It needs to be about your own journey and what works for you. But I would also argue that very much the more work you do on yourself, the more able you are to let go.
And the second one was, a lot of that is on site.
Yes.
Have you thought about, I know there's one online, but is there any thoughts about
So
doing
because
more?
of the very nature of counselling training, we would argue that actually it does need to be face to face, because it is relational and you miss so much online. We were obviously all recently forced to work online during COVID. Oh boy, it's hard work, believe you me, because you miss so many of the cues that normally come your way. And if that's the only training that you've had, rather than face to face and in the room, then actually you miss out on a lot of cues, but also a lot of information, and you just don't have the same relational depth. Most of the research that looks at sort of the outcomes and the efficacy, if you like, of counselling, come back to, bottom line, it's the relationship that makes the difference. And so if it's not face to face, you definitely lose a lot of that. So by its nature, it is face to face.
So I'm not a healthcare professional, I'm a pastor's wife.
Yeah.
But in our church we often, I'm in Paris, so there's a lot of people that come to the very large city to sort of find anonymity.
Yeah.
And I find myself in a lot of counseling situations.
Yes.
I was wondering, is there a way to know for sure when the person needs to have professional counseling? Like, when does it reach that level?
That's a really good question. That is a really good question.
Just repeat the question.
Sorry, yes. So the question there was, is there a kind of a tipping point where it tips from pastoral care into a need for professional counselling? So I think my answer to that would be, how much time are you spending with this person So, you know, sort of half a dozen sessions, I would argue, yeah, that's fine. You know, and equally, that's not a hard and fast rule. I'm not saying, oh, the 7th session, they need professional counselling. What I'm saying is, use your discretion. Sometimes by sort of the 3rd or 4th session in, you can think, oh, actually, this is beyond my skill set. This is beyond what I can do. And at that point, I would argue it's responsible to refer on. But equally, you know, kind of on that 6th session, you might think, oh, another couple of sessions and they'll be fine. You know, so I wind my students up quite a lot of the time because it's like, I'm going to give you one of those really wishy-washy answers. There's no black and white because it depends on your client. You know, and it's my favourite saying is that, you know, but it really does, and it depends on the circumstances in which you find yourself. But I think it's a question we need to be asking ourselves quite a lot is, am I able to meet the needs of this person? You know, do they just need a little help along the way? Or am I out of my depth here? And do they really need more than I can offer them? You know, and I would argue that's a responsible thing to do ultimately. Yes.
Do you think that mental health issues are on the incline over the years you've been involved in things, or is it just because we have a World Wide Web that makes this information more accessible? Because I know churches around the globe are starting to bring in counseling teams because of mental health issues.
Yeah.
Pastoral ministry doesn't solve all that necessarily. Some of the techniques are lacking. So just your thoughts on that.
I think there's lots of things going on. I think mental health is much more on the agenda than it's ever been before, and therefore these things can actually be talked about and accepted, and hopefully therefore not judged within the church so much. Equally, I also think that you know, we live in a society that is sadly where family breakdown and, you know, time not spent with children is becoming the norm. And I think, you know, a lot of that can come back to quality of relationships. God designed us to be relational at the core of our being, and the more individualistic that we become as a society, be that because of phones or, you know, whatever, that, I think, by definition, is actually going to damage our mental health, because we are designed to be in relationship. You know, we are created in the image of God. God is relational within himself, you know, the 3 in 1, we know that. And so, of course, he's made us to be relational. You know, he made us. What was God's purpose in making us in the first place? To love us, you know, to be in relationship with us. And so, because we are made in his image, we are made to be relational. And the more separatist we become, if that's even a word, you know, but the more individualistic we become, the more focused we become on me, my world, just me and my world. I think that is the seeds for mental health issues are right there. You know, I think, you know, you can back that up with sort of the old adage of a problem shared is a problem halved. You know, that obviously that's a proverb that's been around for I don't know how many years, but it's that, in other words, it's that sense of community. You know, the children or the adults that I see that have suffered childhood trauma, some of the reasons why it's been so significant is because they had no one in their corner at that time. You know, it was a very alone experience. But actually, if you surround people, you know, if you surround children with love and care, appropriate love and care, you know, then actually they will come through those difficult situations less harmed because they've had the relational support. Would be my answer.
Thank you.
One thing following on from that, baby, when you were saying when you realise you're out of your depth,
Yeah.
and then you pass people on, did you say you counsel mostly Christian
I do.
people? Okay, so you're not counselling non-Christian.
I do that. Yes, absolutely, I do.
So
I
do you
that as well.
follow the same principles, your Christian principles, in counselling non-Christian?
Yes, I do actually.
Yeah.
It's harder
Yes.
So, for example, it's a number of years ago now. I had a client who walked through the door. He knew that I was a Christian. He knew that, and he said, I want nothing to do with this godlark. Just making that right clear right from now. I do not want God mentioned. Okay, that's not a problem. We didn't mention God. He had significant issues with his self-worth. And so it was about finding something other. Now, it can only ever at best be a broken system, which is why I said to you, it feels like I'm counselling with a hand tied behind my back, because it does. For me, because, but yes, for him, it was like finding something else that he was good at. So, for example, he was actually a very good guitarist, and so he, but he would dismiss when people said to him, "Oh, you played that really well," or "Oh, that was really good," or whatever. He would just dismiss it, a bit like the train guy, as not important because it didn't fit with his value of, well, I'm rubbish. So clearly, they're just saying it because it's the need or they have to do or something. So exploring that and helping him to see that actually, he did have self-worth in that, was, where we ended up. Yes?
Yeah. You mentioned about how currently the devices and phones are changing,
Yeah.
and especially the new generation.
Yeah.
So what is the best approach to our children? For me specifically, my teenager boy, how can I approach him to spend more time with God's word rather than spending hours with the devices?
I think that's a really difficult question. And again, it's like, your son, the kind of things that are going to interest him, and again, it's about asking yourself, I suppose, around, what needs are being met through being hours on the phone. He will be meeting somewhere along the line his need for security, significance and self-worth through being on the phone for hours. And it's kind of working out what else can we offer that's perhaps relationship based rather than online based or phone based, that can still meet that need in the same way, or even, I would argue, better. But just telling somebody, oh, don't spend hours on your phone, without giving them something else that will meet that need within them, you're just lining yourself up for more arguments, I'm afraid. So it's about understanding that the devices are meeting a need, and it's not until we kind of work out how we can meet those needs relationally instead of on the phones that we'll be able to overcome that one. And that is going to be very much down to the individual, family life, whatever it is, that how it works. But yeah, ask yourself those questions. Is that helpful? Any more thoughts or questions? So just one last thing to tell you then. So we are having an open date. If you want to find out more about the courses.
Liz, you had one question.
Oh, sorry, I missed you.
It's fine. Since God created everything, what do you answer to the people who ask you why He allowed for bad things to happen to us and fallen angels to fall and everything?
Okay, another good question. So the question for the video then was how do I sort of explain away, if you like, the issues of brokenness and suffering and why God allowed such things and all of that. Well, again, having done a lot of grappling with this myself, I mean, this is very much Liz Mole theory. It's, nobody else's. It's just from my personal walk and my personal faith that, has brought me to this place. But for me, and like I say, it's very much me, I would say that firstly, God's able to redeem everything. And so even those most broken places, He is able to redeem it and make it beautiful. And able to bring beauty from even this. pile of ashes. And I think that is awesome myself. You know, and we then get the privilege of being able to see that, and actually that enables and facilitates a great depth of faith. And you know, I would absolutely argue that from my own story, that the beauty that comes from the ashes, that actually, my pile of ashes got fairly big, you know, but actually being able to see God bring beauty from even this pile of ashes is pretty awesome, and does something amazing with our faith. You know, it anchors our faith. And I therefore get the privilege actually of living with a much greater peace, I think, than a lot of people do. Because I know my God is at the bottom of the sea. You know, I've taken him down there. I know that God is at the bottom of my sea, and therefore he'll be at the bottom of other clients' seas as well. And, you know, I rejoice, actually, I have to say. My story is as significant as most of my clients. But I rejoice in my story because of how God is using it now to enable me to draw alongside others. I love that. That to me, that's real redemption. You know, and so I thank God. I do. I actually, you know, I am one of those odd people in James that says, count it all joy. You know, when we face trials and difficulties, because to me, there's good. God is totally good, and He's able to bring good from even this pile of ashes, whatever. Excuse me. Whatever this pile of ashes is, I do believe that God is fully able to do that, and that enables us to, excuse me, be equipped to draw alongside other people that have been broken. But I also think in terms of, you know, why was the serpent even in the garden? Why was the tree even in the garden? Why did God give us the choice in the garden in the first place? Do you know what? I think it's because He loves us that much. That He gave us choice. That He did not want. I do believe that, sorry, talk too long, clearly. I do believe that autonomy is really important to God. That free will is really important to God. And so He put the tree in the garden to give us a choice, so that we could walk away. So that, you know, we're not robots. We don't have to love Him. He's going to love us anyway, whatever the weather, you know. But we can choose whether we love Him or not. And I think that's amazing, actually. That God would love us that much that He is willing to send His Son to die when it all goes wrong. Thank you, bless you. You know, I just think that's awesome. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any more?
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any more thoughts? So let me just tell you then, so we are having an open day at church on the way next Saturday, actually, if I've whetted your appetite and thought, oh, I do want to do some training, how do I find out more about the courses? This leaflet gives you a good starting point. Please do make sure you've got one of these before you go. But equally, like I say, we have got an open day. Also, if you think what you've heard this morning, you would, you think, oh, it's not really for me. Oh, but there might be somebody in my church that would be really interested. I'm open to invitations. You know, if you'd like to invite me to your church, speak to your church leaders, think, oh, you know, this funny woman, she'll come and talk to us about these opportunities to equip the church. That is my heart's desire. My heart's desire is that the church is well equipped. So I will come to anywhere you like, you know, to talk about the courses and the equipping that we're able to do. You know, and if I have a 5-minute slot in your service, that's fine. If you want to, you know, I can do equally, expand it a lot more, perhaps do some of the stuff we've done this morning or whatever. I can do basically as much or as little as you want me to do. So, if you would like to invite me to a church service, that's my email address. So it's e.mole@waverleyabbeycollege.ac.uk. If you'd like to go on the website, I have to confess that the website is very Farnham focused. The Bradford bit's not great on there. But there's a search bar at the top. If you put Bradford in there, it will take you to the Bradford page. If you want to perhaps book yourself onto the open day next week, you can just walk in. But if you want to book yourself in on the open day next week, it just helps with resources and stuff. The website is waverleyabbeycollege.ac.uk.
I see.
Yes, AC. It is indeed on the back of the leaflet. And then equally, if I've whet your appetites enough today to think, oh yes, I'm ready to sign up, then you can go to admissions at Waverley, abbeycollege.ac.uk. Feel free to take a photograph of those email addresses if you'd like to. Most of them are in the leaflet or on the leaflet. The only one that's not is mine. Please don't kind of give that to all and sundry. I don't want too many emails in the inbox. But equally, if you would like to invite me to your church to talk about some of this stuff, then please do drop me a line. Or speak to me throughout the weekend or whatever. Okay. Shall we just pray? Lord, we thank you for your grace and your goodness. We thank you, Lord, that you are indeed able to redeem all things. We thank you, Lord, that you desire freedom for your people. And pray, Lord, that you would equip more of us to be able to meet the needs of your people. Jesus, in your name.